This is Kipp Coddington broadcasting live from Laramie, Wyoming. And actually, I want to begin that obviously we're all living through very unusual times. And I hope everyone is safe and sound and following the advice of their local political and health leadership. And I'm going to be talking about providing an update on CCUS policies in Wyoming. But obviously talking about this topic pales in comparison to everyone's health and well-being. So we're living through trying times, and everyone here at the University of Wyoming just hopes everyone is safe and sound. I also wanted to thank Alex Croca and Michelle Littlefield of USEA and USEA generally overall for sponsoring this webinar. As Alex indicated, I'm going to go through a series of slides here. The slides have more content than I can cover efficiently in the about 40 minutes that I'm going to talk, and then we'll leave ample time, as Alex indicated, for Q&A at the end. But these slides will be made available, so there's more content here that I'm going to be going over verbally, but at least you'll have the resource in the form of this deck at the conclusion of the webinar. So again, the title of my talk is Update on Wyoming's New Carbon Capture, Utilization, and Storage Policies. I want to begin with a disclaimer. Obviously, like many academic institutions throughout the United States, we are very fortunate to be funded by one or more federal agencies. In this instance, the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming is fortunate to have funding from the U.S. Department of Energy, including for one or more particular CCUS projects that I will be briefly touching upon. Here is the disclaimer. Under no circumstance does the Department of Energy approve this talk in advance, and I am certainly not purporting to be speaking on behalf of DOE. So this DOE disclaimer is important. I'm going to briefly really only cover two topics. I'm going to give a brief overview of the current status of CCUS in the great state of Wyoming for those of you that have not been fortunate to visit us yet. And then I'll talk about some of the recent developments, including from the executive branch, as well as from the legislative session. The Wyoming legislature just recently concluded a budget session a few weeks ago, in which they also enacted quite a few substantive laws, and I'll be briefly touching upon those substantive laws to the extent that they bear on CCUS. And then again, as I indicated, after about 40 minutes, we'll turn to Q&A. So Wyoming's CCUS overview. For those of you that don't know, CCUS is critically important for Wyoming for a wide variety of reasons, beginning with Wyoming produces prodigious amounts of fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, and crude oil. Most people, I think, are aware of Wyoming's leadership with respect to coal from the Powder River Basin in the northeast corner of the state. But we also are a significant producer of both natural gas and crude oil. Additionally, like all other states, there are power plants in the state of Wyoming, and those power plants produce a lot of electricity. And according to EIA data from December 2019, the bulk of that electricity that is produced in Wyoming is produced from coal. For those of you that have visited the state, Wyoming is known for Yellowstone, gorgeous scenery, wonderful geology, and the like. It's also known for an abundance of natural resources across the board, including wind. So we have historically had a significant amount of wind generation, and that is anticipated to grow. But at the moment, those power plants in Wyoming historically have relied upon coal. And again, looking at this chart here from December 2019, the bulk of those plants continue to use coal. And Wyoming, even though we are producing prodigious amounts of primary energy, both fossil and renewables coming on strongly, as well as electricity, we export nearly all of it. So again, quoting EIA here, Wyoming produces 15 times more energy than it consumes and is the biggest net energy supplier among the states. And this is, of course, relevant this is because of several different reasons. Number one, there just are not a lot of people that live in Wyoming. I think the current population of the state is 570,000. There are 9 states in the United States that have more cattle than people. And on that list, Wyoming ranks 5th. And at the bottom, you'll see one of the gorgeous animals in the great state of Wyoming, a pronghorn antelope, which are everywhere. And I haven't looked at the recent data, but under some measures, there are almost as many pronghorn antelope in the state of Wyoming as there are people. Indeed, flying into Laramie, it actually is not uncommon to see pronghorn antelope in the parking lot at the Laramie airport. That is not a unusual occurrence. So we're producing a lot of fossil energy. There are not a lot of good citizens living in the state of Wyoming. So we're exporting nearly all of that energy. So that means the state of Wyoming is acutely sensitive to the energy policies of the states that are receiving Wyoming energy. So to a great extent, Wyoming's energy future is not entirely within its own hands. The state is to a great extent dependent upon the outside markets, as well as now a growing number of states that are enacting mid-century and or sooner decarbonization requirements and or goals. So this chart, and we've all seen numerous versions of this chart, this image that shows states with renewable portfolio standards, various policies, with credit here to the Smart Electric Power Alliance and the World Resources Institute. This is a chart that shows both states with clean energy mandates in dark blue, greater than 50%, and states with other clean energy mandates in a lighter blue or aqua. The hash marks show the footprints of utilities that have decarbonization goals. So Wyoming is sitting out here in the Rocky Mountain West. At least to the west and north and south, we are more and more surrounded by states and or utilities that are adopting these decarbonization goals. So to the extent that we are exporting energy into those markets, we have to be acutely sensitive to these goals and requirements. And indeed, that is why for many, many years, the state of Wyoming has been pursuing CCUS technologies. We have been pursuing CCUS technologies not only because it's the right thing to do, but it is because decarbonization is what our customers of energy more and more are requiring and or demanding. So this is quite a serious topic for the state of Wyoming. In terms of, for those of you that aren't acquainted with Wyoming, Wyoming is blessed with a fair number of CCUS relevant and related geologic attributes, infrastructure, and projects. This chart, this image shows the state of Wyoming. Wyoming is one of the only states in the nation that has CO2 pipeline infrastructure. That is shown in red. Highlighted in dashed red and dashed blue are potential future pathways for expansions of that pipeline network under an initiative called the Wyoming Pipeline Corridor Initiative that is led by the Office of Governor Gordon, that we are fortunate to have. You'll see along that pipeline, coincidentally and fortunately, are some rather large emission sources of CO2. You will also see that Wyoming has a fair number of existing CO2 enhanced oil recovery operations, as well as potential fields which are believed to have that potential. So the existing CO2 EOR floods on this image are shown in the blue triangles, and the black triangles indicate potential future growth along that. As I'll be explaining a little bit further, the Wyoming Carbon Safe project, again with funding from the U.S. Department of Energy, is in the northeast corner, the upper right-hand corner of the state. That's also where the Powder River Basin is. And that project is located within a few short miles of that pipeline. So from a bringing it all together point of view, in terms of geology, enhanced oil recovery, saline formations that are believed to be suitable for saline storage, infrastructure in the form of projects, pipelines, and the like, Wyoming, I think, is one of those states that really has it all. So we're quite hopeful that carbon capture and storage is going to continue to grow here. As a matter of governmental policy, though, I think Wyoming is also interesting because from a state level, from the executive branch, from the legislative branch to the county level, and from educational institutions, the state has been aligned towards enactment of CCUS policies for a long time. So identified on this chart are some of the Wyoming entities in the public sector that have been focused on CCUS. My employer, the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming, is one on the academic side. The Wyoming Infrastructure Authority, led by Jason Beggar and his team in Gillette, that's the entity that manages the Integrated Test Center up in Gillette, Wyoming, which is leading on CCUS utilization technologies, and the state is fortunate to have basic leadership and WIA engage in these activities. We also have the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, led by Dr. Steve Carpenter in Casper, Wyoming. As its name indicates, the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute is focused on just that, and that includes CO2 EOR. And I think many of you are well aware of Dr. Carpenter's leadership of ISO and related initiatives with respect to the enactment of standards for both saline storage, EOR storage, and the like. The Wyoming legislature for many years has been enacting a variety of CCUS policies. I'll be talking about in a couple minutes what they have done most recently. Wyoming, along with other states such as Texas, Dakota, and here in Wyoming, we're fortunate to be teamed with a lot of like-minded states on many of these projects. And here I'd like to give a shout out to the good folks at the EERC up at the University of North Dakota, John Haryu, and many others there that we are fortunate to be teamed with. The state of Wyoming about a decade ago enacted a form of the CCUS laws and regulations that were recommended by the model rules promulgated by the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission. I'll explain what those are separately. And then, of course, a whole series of Wyoming governors, including current Governor Gordon and his excellent policy staff, Randall Luthi, the governor's energy advisor, and Rennie McKay, the overall policy advisor, have been supportive in the enactment and advancement of a variety of CCUS policies. And again, I'll be giving an update on that. But it's important to realize that these policies extend beyond the state level and stretch down into local government. So Campbell County, the Campbell County Commissioners, Commissioner Randy Bell and others up in Gillette. They're in Gillette, which appropriately deems itself to be the energy capital of the world. They are also sitting in the midst of all that coal in the Powder River Basin. Campbell County is in the midst of what they're calling a Carbon Valley initiative, where in that county and in the city of Gillette, they are working hard to become all things CCUS in terms of projects and research. They're working with Gillette College. They are getting support from the University of Wyoming. So just like Silicon Valley in California was all things silicon and remains that and related technologies, Gillette, with the support of the state, is pushing for that with respect to carbon products. And there are other counties in Wyoming that are doing that as well. This slide, I'm not going to go through this. These are the most of the existing Wyoming laws that cover CCUS. So Wyoming has defined who owns the pore space. It has permitting procedures with respect to CCUS. It provides a mechanism for post-closure monitoring or reporting and verification via trust fund approach, provides for unitization of storage interests, and on and on and on. So a project developer doing a project in Wyoming would have certainty on some of these topics. So from an investor point of view, going into a jurisdiction where the legal unknowns have been resolved by the legislature via regulation, certainly is a incentive to further investment. And again, Wyoming, to the extent it could, has tried to lay the legal groundwork here. So now I'm going to spend just the remaining 10 minutes or so going over some of the recent highlights on carbon capture, utilization, and storage in Wyoming. And I'm going to break it out into several different buckets: laws, executive branch, what's going on at the county level, and then what is going on with my employer, the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming here in Laramie. In terms of laws, I've related to CCUS. I've divided them here into two buckets. One is with respect to the existing coal-fired fleet, and then others. Most of the recent CCUS related legal announcements by the Wyoming legislature have focused on the existing fleet of coal-fired power plants in Wyoming. And like many other states, some of those power plants have been slated for retirement over the coming 5, 10, or 15 years or so. So the Wyoming legislature in the past couple of sessions have tried to look at that coal fleet and say, so what can we do with those assets, with a focus on trying to encourage, if not compel, decarbonization in the face of the current state of the technology and obviously the current state of play of economics. Probably the most recent and relevant legal CCUS development by the Wyoming legislature was actually just passed I guess 2 or 3 weeks ago and signed into law by Governor Gordon about a week or two ago. And that was House Bill 200, which is highlighted in here. And what that bill does is it directs the Wyoming Public Service Commission to, quote, establish by rule energy portfolio standards that will maximize the use of dispatchable and reliable low carbon electricity. In terms of that phrase, low carbon electricity, low carbon is defined as, quote, electricity that is generated using carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology that produces carbon emissions not greater than 650 pounds of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour of generated electricity averaged over 1 calendar year. So this really is a low carbon and CCUS focused low carbon electricity standard, just like many states have renewable portfolio standards. This is in effect a CCUS based low carbon generation standard. And again, this is premised on the observation in the state of Wyoming, and certainly shared by me, that many of these states that are surrounding us that are enacting these policies will already have or will accept CCUS-based electricity generation as meeting those decarbonization goals. Certainly, the early clues, the early policy clues, are indicative of that, but we are not taking that for granted, and we are monitoring those out-of-state developments. This law, HB 200, really has 5 relevant and unique and important attributes I briefly wanted to highlight here. First, it requires the establishment of a baseline founded on reliability. But the law states that the PSC must ensure that new or expanded intermittent generation resources do not unreasonably diminish power quality or increase momentary outages across a utility's service territory or in any particular location. So for those of you that are PSC attorneys out there, I think we might all agree that reliability has been an inherent and not an explicit part of PSC authorities across the country, but here in Wyoming under HB 200, they are making now reliability a more explicit consideration under these low carbon standards to be issued by the PSC, focused on intermittent sources. Second, cost recovery is under HB 200 is limited for wind and solar resources that replace low carbon coal. So in the last legislative session back in 2009, under a bill known as Senate File 159, the legislature enacted a law that made it difficult for basically put a requirement on coal-fired power plants that they have to go through the process of going through a bona fide sale to try to find a new purchaser for that asset as before retiring it. And if they fail to do so, there would be restrictions on capital recovery for replacement generation. Wyoming Public Service is still in the midst of issuing rules and regulations to put that requirement into place. HB 200 builds upon that and would restrict rate recovery for replacement generation unless there is a showing that the owner or operator of a coal-fired utility was moving towards achievement of these low-cost standards. Third, the bill, subject to important limits, provides rate recovery for the implementation and deployment of CCUS technology that is subject to cost caps. And again, the Wyoming Public Service Commission will have to be engaged in rulemaking or other procedures in the months and years ahead to put meat on that bone. Fourthly, HB 200 recognizes sales of carbon dioxide for enhanced oil recovery. I believe this is one of the more novel aspects of the bill. Again, for you PSC attorneys out there, it generally, subject to a special tariff and the like, it is difficult for a company that is in the business of generating and selling electricity to recognize revenues from other business activities under these PSC-based rules and regulations. Under HB 200 now, the bill says as follows: a public utility may apply to the Commission for authorization to allow a portion of any revenues from the sale of carbon dioxide capture or utilized as a result of the deployment of CCUS. Fifth, the law requires that tax incentives such as 45Q be considered. And again, the Wyoming Public Service Commission is going to have to sort all this out, presumably through rulemaking going forward. Pivoting to the executive branch, again focused on CCUS activities. The Wyoming Integrated Test Center, again led by WIA, which in turn is led by Jason Baker, is continuing to be actively engaged in attracting researchers and projects to that test facility. Wyoming DEQ is in the midst of applying for primacy of the underground injection control Class 6 rules. I obviously cannot speak for Wyoming DEQ, and I'm not doing so here. But I believe there is optimism that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency will be at some point here in the relatively near future will be making a hopefully positive determination on that. You also should know, again, under the leadership of Wyoming Governor Gordon, and you'll see the link there to the media story. Wyoming Governor, in conjunction with the University of Wyoming and other entities in the state of Wyoming, are in the midst of looking at coal retrofits for CCUS at one or more coal-fired power plants in the United States. Those studies are underway, and I will just refer you to that newspaper article for what is in the public domain on that. And next, the Wyoming Public Service Commission is in the midst of a proceeding regarding the status of the coal plants in Wyoming, and that will play out in the months and years ahead. And again, I can't speak for the Wyoming Public Service Commission, but would just refer questions to them. Those are really the CCUS related executive branch activities I wanted to highlight. Next, at the county level, I did mention that Campbell County, which sits to the left, which is sitting in the heart of the Powder River Basin, has announced its Carbon Valley initiative. And again, this is Wyoming version of Silicon Valley, and Campbell County, with the support of the political leadership at the state level in Wyoming and the School of Energy Resources, is moving forward with that initiative. And if you have further questions, we'd be happy to put you in touch with the folks in Campbell County, Wyoming. In terms of the University of Wyoming, we'll do a little tooting of our horn here. My employer, the School of Energy Resources, has a new leader. Dr. Holly Krutka is the new executive director of the School of Energy Resources. We have been blessed for the past decade to be under the leadership of Dr. Mark Northam, who many of you know. So the baton has been handed from Dr. Mark to Dr. Holly Krutka. So we are very fortunate to have Holly here in Laramie, and she is well known and needs no further introduction. Again, at the University of Wyoming, we are moving forward in these difficult times, as many academic with a wide variety of research projects. We do have the Wyoming Carbon Safe Project Phase 2 up in Gillette, and again, we're teamed with a whole host of good folks from around the country on that project. And again, I'll give a shout out to the EERC at the University of North Dakota. The School of Energy Resources, under legislation, also announced last year, issued a request for proposal for the design and construction of a pilot project using advanced coal-based generation technology to capture at least 70% of CO2 emissions. That RFP is closed, and the responses are being evaluated. And I can refer you to Scott Quillen, the director of research at the School of Energy Resources, and also Holly, if you have further questions on that. And again, we are branching out further into the field of regulatory and policy analysis at the School of Energy Resources. So again, under the leadership of Dr. Mark Northam and continuing with Dr. Holly Krutka, we have launched a Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis that is looking intently at these low carbon issues as a matter of law, policy, and regulation, not only within the state, but beyond our borders. And we will be looking at these issues more broadly beyond low carbon issues, but that certainly is our focus now. And I think that brings me, after 35 minutes, so I've wrapped up here about 5 minutes early, that concludes what I wanted to say, Alex. And at this point, I think we might pivot to, if anyone has any questions. So I guess we can go to the chat function for that. And again, if I'll answer these questions in real time to the best of my ability, and if I cannot, my contact information is here. So please feel free to send me an email or text or call me on my cell. I'm working remotely, as most of you are as well. And if I cannot answer your questions here today, I will, to the best of my ability, answer them remotely or offline, or more importantly, refer them to the many other experts in the state of Wyoming, so we can address those for you. So Alex, I think I'm gonna hand the baton back to you, if that is acceptable.
Yes, most definitely. And thank you so much, Kipp. We very much appreciate you sharing your knowledge and giving us everyone an idea of the status of things in Wyoming, which is indeed a leader, I think not only domestically, but internationally, especially with regards to CCUS and clean coal technologies. So just to reiterate what I said earlier regarding questions or comments, please feel free to ask your questions through the Q&A or the chat box. We're monitoring both of those. So Kipp, the first question we have is Wyoming a primacy state with regards to EPA?
Wyoming is a primacy state for, that's a great question. I should be able to know this off the top of my head. Like many other oil and gas states, Wyoming has primacy for many of the UIC rules, including Class 2, for example, and other classes as well. I don't know those other classes off the top of my head. Importantly for CCUS, however, the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality a couple of years ago has applied for primacy with Class 6, which are the geologic storage rule sets under the Safe Drinking Water Act's Underground Injection Control Program, and it is that Class 6 application that is pending.
Great, thank you. And then if anyone has any other questions or comments, feel free to type them in. You gave a pretty comprehensive presentation here, Kipp, so you may have preempted everyone's questions. Up here we have one. Is there anything new in Wyoming related to the new ISO standards for certifying any credits associated with secure geologic storage?
That is a great question, and I will defer that question. I'm going, and I apologize, I don't see who are posing these questions. If you email me, I will put you in touch with Dr. Steve Carpenter, again, who runs the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute in Casper. I am probably going to botch his ISO title, but Steve is head of delegation under the International Storage Organization programs with respect to standards related to CCUS, both for saline storage and in CO2 enhanced oil recovery. So Dr. Steve Carpenter would know the high status of implementation of that ISO standard in the state. I do know that under 45Q, the 45Q guidance, most of us on this webinar, if not all of us, are waiting on the Internal Revenue Service, and you have to feel sorry for those good folks at the IRS and those rest of those federal employees who are really working now on very difficult circumstances. So talking about the IRS and them issuing guidance is I think perhaps unfair at this time. You're trying to implement those stimulus packages, but the IRS at some point here will issue guidance on the definition of secure geologic storage. The University of Wyoming has written some papers on that topic, and those are posted on my LinkedIn account. And we've also done research led by Dr. Tara Righetti at the College of Law on what that ISO standard looks like under states that have robust oil and gas regulatory regimes. That would include North Dakota, our good friends at North Dakota, our good friends in Texas, Oklahoma, and elsewhere. And I think that research concluded that these existing state regulations led by the oil and gas commissions well fit within that implementation of that ISO standard, such that if the IRS were to have in whole or in part some aspect of compliance with the new ISO standard for storage in association with CO2 EOR, that we think that would be functional and would work well. So again, I'd refer you to Dr. Steve Carpenter, and I can put you in touch with him and also send you our papers on that topic.
Got it. And USCA has worked with Steve Carpenter, and great guy and very well respected. So if for whatever reason you can't get in touch with Kipp, get in touch with us, and we can direct you to Steve as well. Next question, for the 45Q tax credit, must a class 6 well be used, or can smaller projects use a class 2 well?
That is a great question. So under the current version, and let me say here, even though I'm a lawyer, I guess I'm now a non-practicing lawyer. I guess I'm actually now an academic. I'm not certain what I am, but so the following is not legal advice. So I would encourage you to consult your tax lawyer. Under the current version of 45Q, before it was amended, the 45Q credit could be had by still complying with class 2, but then the expectation was that EOR company had to opt into subpart RR of the EPA's greenhouse gas reporting program, which of course includes the requirement that the owner operator of the oil field have in place an EPA approved MRV plan. MRV, of course, meaning monitoring, reporting, and verification. Several of those MRV plans have been approved by EPA, and they are publicly available on the EPA website. Occidental Petroleum has a couple of them. Here in Wyoming, ExxonMobil at Chute Creek has an approved subpart RR MRV plan. But those operations, as I understand it, are not injecting under class 6 because they are not currently required to. Again, we are waiting on the IRS to issue guidance on what all this means under amended 45Q. I would still anticipate that injection under class 6 would not be required, but that is my speculation. I think the issue is what is that regulatory piece that will be required, that may be required to sit on top of the class 2 rules for an EOR company in order to provide assurance of storage. Will it be subpart RR? Will it be the ISO standard? Will it be state regulation? Will it be something in between? And we're waiting on the IRS to issue that guidance.
Great, thanks, Kipp. 45Q, very, very popular topic these days, and rumors that there will be more guidance coming out very shortly. So exciting times in that respect. The next question we had was if you could go back to the slide with the HB 200 bill. I think you may have cut out for a couple moments or a couple seconds there. So is it possible to get information on the 5 points that were brought up on that bill?
Yes, absolutely. So what I can do if that questioner, and I apologize if I was cutting out, if that questioner will send me an email, I have a analysis of that bill that is posted on my LinkedIn account, so I can send a link to that analysis. And again, all this is with the caveat is that bill, this is my initial speculation, but it will ultimately have to be implemented by the Wyoming Public Service Commission, led by Chairwoman Kara Fornstrom, who I believe many of you know as well. Kara Fornstrom in the PSC regulated community is a leader nationwide on CCUS. Ultimately, it will be the PSC that will define how HB 200 is implemented. But I've done my best initial run at it in a short paper on my LinkedIn account, that a link to which I can provide.
Great, thanks, Kipp. And then the next question, is there a good CO2 EOR miscibility database for the Wyoming fields?
Absolutely, and here, I don't know whether Dr. Steve Carpenter is still on. I actually wish I had had a deal with Steve before this webinar, where every time I mentioned his name, I would get some compensation from him behind the scenes. But yes, again, because Wyoming has a entire state agency that is focused on enhanced oil recovery, and that is the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute in Casper. Steve runs a great team there. They have a wide variety of technical databases. Whether they have databases on miscibility information, I can't answer that off the top of my head. I suspect they do, but I would direct those questions again to Steve Carpenter. In terms of saline storage and these as well, the comparable group, again at the School of Energy Resources, is the Center for Economic Geology Research, that used to be known as the Carbon Management Institute. That is where the state's technical research resides, the excellence on storage per se. And if the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute does not have that information, it very well may exist within the Center for Economic Geology Research. And again, a shout out here to Scott Quillinan, the Director of Research for SCR, and also for Dr. Fred McLaughlin and others who are leading that CAGR work. So again, send me an email and we can put you in touch with the right folks to get that question answered.
Great, thanks, Kipp. And I think that's a good idea if you're going to be on future webinars, is to make sure to work out kind of some marketing deals with anyone who you may mention.
Exactly, yes, exactly.
Well, with that, it looks like pretty much all the questions have been answered. I think if this wasn't mentioned earlier, we will be sharing Kipp's presentation on our website, on the USCA event page for this webinar. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Kipp. I'd like to thank my colleague Michelle Littlefield for organizing this webinar and taking care of all the logistics of everything. Kipp, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this webinar. Very informative, and I think everyone who attended, we had over 100 attendees. I think they all found it very valuable. Thank you to everyone for attending. USCA's Consensus Program will be holding its next webinar on April 22nd, where we will be hosting the National Energy Technology Laboratory, NETL, to discuss some of their efforts to incorporate energy storage at fossil fuel power generation facilities. It should be a very, very interesting webinar as well. If you haven't received any notification regarding that webinar yet, I believe we sent out our first notice a few days ago. Please be on the lookout, as we will be sending a couple more reminders. So thank you again to everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe, staying healthy out there, and enjoying extra time with their loved ones, if possible. So thank you again, and I hope that everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.